right, it's now 7 o'clock, time for us to get into the newsroom, and this is where we do a retrospect of how we, the media, have been covering some of the stories and what we call the big stories. Now, in case you're joining us now on set, we have Honorable Yusuf Hassan, who's Member of Parliament for Kamkunji. We have Ochieng Ogodo, who's environmental journalist, and Mark Bichachi, a communications consultant. Now, on June the 26th, the process of translocating 11 black rhinos to the Tsavo East National Park from Nairobi and Lake Nakuru National Park started. But questions have continued to mount over the death of 9 of them. And as Kenya still awaits answers of the mysterious deaths, former KWS Director Julius Kipngetich says the deaths might have been occasioned by negligence from top management as well as indiscipline at the headquarters. Let's listen in.
26 days after 9 black rhinos were reported to have died at the Tsavo National Park in what the Kenya Wildlife Service has termed to be a result of salt poisoning, blame consistently and squarely seemed to lie on the top management at Kenya Wildlife Service.
The loss of those rhinos then is a product of systematic dismantling of KWS in the last 6 years. And so my belief is that some protocols were skipped in the movements of those rhinos and kidogo some fall off in discipline.
KWS moved to parade these 18 horns on Thursday as evidence that the 9 rhinos had died, further deepening the saga, with questions on the whereabouts of the rhino carcasses, despite Tourism Cabinet Secretary Najib Balala's assurance that their images were to be viewed as well.
And they will be paraded at 10 o'clock at KWS, including the pictures of the cameras that were on the waterholes or the pans, as well as the carcass.
The one-time director at KWS, Julius Kipngetich, the man who oversaw the translocation of over 250 elephants from Shimba Hills to Tsavo National Park in 2005, says the deaths would have been prevented.
For example, the place where those rhinos were moved to in Tsavo East is a semi-desert, very dry. And the animals were coming from a luxury home. Nairobi National Park actually is the #1 breeding site for rhinos in the country.
Balala has since formed an independent probe team that is expected to get to the bottom of the puzzle, even as he halts translocation of another 3 more rhinos from Lake Nakuru National Park. Official records have shown high success rates in the recent months, with a single mortality being reported out of 74 rhinos relocated between July 2017 and February 2018. Cecilia Kesho, KTN News.
So that's one of the stories. But away from that, more voices from the Maasai leadership have come out in support of the Mau evictions. The members of parliament, however, are calling for more dignified approach to the eviction. Here is the story with Rita Tinina.
The recent evictions from the Mau complex have sparked a fresh round of both criticism and support for the initiative at saving one of the country's most crucial water towers. Local leaders from the Maasai community are rallying behind the initiative.
Mau must be conserved, and we are saying anybody within the cat life should be considered as an encroacher of the forest and a thief, and should be treated as such.
We support the government position in conserving the Mau.
The MP say the evictions, which have been going on for over a week, should be conducted in a manner that does not breach human rights.
We are saying that those people who are actually being removed should also be removed in a humane manner. They should not be harassed.
But the leaders say some of the affected may have genuine title deeds and should be compensated, a position held by the Law Society of Kenya Rift Valley branch.
And those title deeds were given out by the government officials. So it is upon the government to see how to assist these people, because they did not give themselves a title deeds. They were given by the government.
And also to take drastic action against land officers who issued those title deeds.
If they have to be evicted, and perhaps looks like this is the only thing that has to be done for conservation to take place, then they have to be compensated properly under the Constitution.
A section of Rift Valley leaders, led by Senate Majority Leader Kipchumba Murkomen, have opposed the evictions. But despite the varied opinions on the exercise, the parent ministry, the Ministry of Environment, has maintained a loud silence on the matter, and so has the president and his deputy, as the Mau becomes an emotive political issue once again. Rita Tinina, KTN News.
All right, so matters environment today is what we're going to be looking at in the newsroom, and I'll start with you, Ochieng Ogodo, environmental journalist. Let's start with Mau Forest, and of course there's been back and forth. We do know that politicians often take advantage of certain situations to try and, endear themselves to the people, but at the risk of sometimes our future. Now, Mau Forest, it's not the first time that it's coming up. Maybe just to start off with your thoughts on how we have covered that story, and maybe if there are elements that we have left out that are crucial.
I think the Mau Forest is a very important issue for this country, and we just can't wish it away. Whether you're a politician or you're not a politician, you need to understand the interaction between climate and vegetation to really understand what Mau stands for this country and beyond. If you look at it, from the point of view that it feeds down up to the Nile Basin, that's a huge area that needs Mau Forest. So the coverage, I don't want to really say, because I'm a journalist, I don't want to say that my colleagues have not done well. But I feel they have not done pretty well in trying to really situate the issue the way where it should be, and actually make the people to understand the benefits of having the forest, how the forests play a role in throwing back the moisture into the atmosphere, and then how the forests are very important in ensuring the atmosphere.
For the sake of the ecosystem.
Yes.
Let me come to you, Mheshimiwa. And as a politician, we see politicians jumping onto an issue like this. I remember not too long ago, the same Mau Forest, there was a politician who said that rain does not come from trees. Basically to just, try and endear himself to the people. But sometimes, aren't we literally selling our future generations for the sake of clinching that, majority, or, endearing yourself to the people?
Yes, I think politicians have to respond and react to public opinion. They cannot be silent or insensitive to the feelings of the people they represent. And to a certain extent, they get involved in a lot of things. But what is lacking here, I think, is not so much what a politician does. It's the fact, first of all, the issue has been politicized, and it's also been tribalized to create that emotional reaction that a particular community is being disadvantaged by this particular action. And what I find there isn't sufficient reporting on is how important the ecosystem is, and how the Mau, as the environmental reporter has said, how important Mau is for all of us, for our future. It's a lifeline. And what is happening there now with the encroachment and the shrinking of our forest has an apocalyptic kind of consequences for us as human beings. And here I think it is the responsibility of the government to have the right policies, to take the right actions, to protect our ecosystem. And climate change is real. You may wish it away, but it's very important that we put it there. Now, what is happening here is that, of course, I can predict that whenever something happens to a particular community, a politician would be there. But the question I want to ask here is, why have we, when did we kind of lose the ball? Because Mau Forest has been a problem for many years. It has been a political issue. In fact, it has affected the fortunes of one of our prominent politicians, to the extent that people say
he lost the presidential elections as a result of the position that he had taken on the Mau forest.
Correct.
So I think here the government must be firm, it must do its job, and the media should not lose focus of this particular story. We should have environmental journalists reporting on this issue on a regular basis, because here we have this amnesia. Another story would come next week and we'd forget.
And we'd forget. All right, Mark, your thoughts on Mau Forest and the fact that it is a crucial, I mean, in terms of our future, it is one of those things that could affect us negatively, very, very drastically. But somehow on coverage, we seem to let the politicians get away with the day by politicizing it and making it an issue of our community, or we're being fought, or it's being inhumane, and maybe there is an inhumane element, but are we losing the bigger picture?
We lost the bigger picture a while back. We forget that we cleared out the Aberdares, we cleared out Mount Elgon, we cleared out a lot of water towers in this country. It's just the Mau that is a particular issue, and it is an issue because of the nature of politics that is played in the region. Let's start here. Number one, we erroneously think that climate change is a thing for our children. My dear brothers and sisters, climate change is here with us today. Please go back to your childhood river and tell me whether it is as clean or as deep as it was when you were 15 years old. Climate change is not something that is going to affect us 10 years, 100 years in the future. It is here with us. If Japan today can record a temperature of 41.1 degrees Celsius, you don't need to look any further to know that we are in danger. If you were to look at Kenya and how many floods we've had, how many flooding disasters we've had in this year, you will know there's something amiss. If you consider how long the cold season is lasting in Kenya, suddenly we will have to buy winter clothes in July because we are freezing. But we want to act like it is inhuman to save ourselves from people who, by the way, are as corrupt and as greedy as NYS people. I have no sympathy on encroachers for this very simple reason. I cannot sit here and clap my hands when people are taken to court for stealing billions of shillings, and then feel sympathy for people who are literally stealing water and food from the mouths of children and mothers who need to feed those children, and say it is inhuman to evict them. Let us be very, very serious. A thief at the cross and the thief at the palace is a thief. So the person who is corrupt, stealing an acre on account that they are poor or they are squatters is equally a thief. And in fact, for them, they are guilty of stealing what is the most fundamental thing to human existence, which is water.
Their argument might be that the title deeds some of them hold have actually been given by the government. And not just that, we have schools, government schools that have been built in the forest. Who built those schools?
Okay, now let me assess that thing globally. Number one, the people in NYS will say, we got the money from government. It is government who paid them. Okay? The Ruaraka land was government's land. Government bought it back to itself. So we have established that the Kenyan government is well capable of doing very insane things. Okay? So let's be clear. So don't tell me you got a title deed from the government. Even Girita was paid by government. So no issue there. Second issue. Okay? Number one, the schools were built by the community. Okay? The government provided the teachers. Okay? Because we must separate the need of students to learn from the illegality of the action. For example, there are many schools in Kibra today that have government teachers that are not registered. There is a greenhouse yesterday that was funded by government, which was on a road reserve, and the same government came and destroyed it. This is how it is in Kenya. But if you're going to correct things, you must sweep NYS with the same broom you sweep squatters. And we can't be, as a country, the same people. Let me tell you, this demarcation line for me even is wrong, because we demarcated 40,000 acres irregularly and gave it to squatters. What did we tell them? We told them that the next time you want more land, just call your cousin, uncle, and auntie, and they move into the forest further, and then we'll create another line. It must stop. And then this fascination with Kenyans with land. Mike has 5 acres in the middle of Kiseri, and he's never seen it. This environmentalist has 20 acres in Kisumu. He's never seen it. We are obsessed with land that we do not make use of. The reality of the matter, Kenyans need to stop smoking the cocaine of ugali, maize, and land. We are addicted to it. We need to change. There's stocks you can buy. There's many other things that Kenyans need to invest in. Yes.
All right, Ochieng, of course, now the question of environment coming to the fore. And do we give it enough coverage that it deserves? Because like Mark rightly puts it, global climate change is not something that is of the future. It is here now. We can feel it.
Yeah, I think I'm going to say this. If you take it as an event reporting, other than issue-based reporting, you're going to miss the whole thing in it. So you need to focus on the underlying issues pertaining to the Mau forest. But if you wait for a crisis, you do crisis journalism, and wait for a time when there's a crisis, and then you jump in, and you report on the crisis, giving the politicians the platform with which to bash one another.
But you know the saying, saying that if it bleeds, it leads. So when you do it when there is nothing surrounding it, is it likely to even get space on a newspaper? When you're just talking matters environment.
Let me tell you, there was a report tabled at the UN High-Level Political Forum on July 10th in New York. And it was talking about the water crisis, and Africa being one of the hotspots where we'll have the water crisis. And recently we had Cape Town was almost running without water.
Literally ran out of water.
And they were going to what we call day zero. I mean, you don't have to wait politicians to start throwing mud at each other to get a peg for you to do an issue-based story. If you're going to do that one, then you are missing the whole point. And therefore, if you take, for example, in the 2014, when the government tried to evict people from Mau, and then it was like something between the then Prime Minister and the current Deputy President. I mean, the whole important issues gets drowned into that one, and nobody sees the importance of the issues you're talking about. So I think the media needs to really situate the issue where it should be. And don't tell me that environmental issues, I mean, cannot make good stories. I don't think so.
Well, it's one thing for you to say they can make good stories because you know that they can, Mheshimiwa, or you wanted to weigh in on that, but it's another thing for them to actually find space on newsroom or in the newspapers, and maybe that's a discussion we need to have. Mheshimiwa.
Well, I think he's absolutely right in the sense that we really need to move it beyond politicians. Why don't the journalists interview specialists? Why do they go to and give the microphone to a politician who is expressing an opinion, and a poor opinion in that sense, which is skewed to favor a particular
political
line. So I think if the journalists were doing their job, they'll be able to speak to specialists. We would be able to talk about the destruction, the death and the destruction that has been caused by climate change. We fluctuate between famine and floods, drought, constant drought. We're a water-poor country. For example, when I was growing up in Nairobi, you could drink water straight from the tap. You could drink Nairobi water, Nairobi River water. It was clean and healthy. Now, with population increase, pollution and environmental degradation, there is not a drop of water. We're now a culture of drinking bottled water, which is the way we are going.
We actually buy water and we've made it acceptable.
So obviously it is a serious crisis that we have. I don't know how many newspapers or television channels have an environmental editor or an environmental correspondent. I think there aren't enough resources given to that particular job. But the issue, the destruction of our ecosystem and our forests started with previous governments, responsible governments that played a big part in that encroachment. Even in the Mau, I understand that very powerful political figures have grabbed land. And these poor squatters have just been used as a fodder. But in fact, the biggest beneficiaries of this encroachment
could be politicians.
Are big politicians who are well known in this country.
You know what is interesting is these evictions came into play when a task force was put into office to look at the matter. So we have scientists from the Ministry of Environment, from the Forestry Service, from all these people who have done a determination that this is the right thing to do. We've forgotten that for you to see a single policeman in the Mau evicting people, this is permission that has come from the highest officers in the land. But what we are consumed by is, as a nation, we want to look at the Mau and try and see between this dance of the Kalenjin and the Maasai who's going to come out on top. Yet we forget the losers do not even necessarily live in the Mau. The losers live downstream, many, many miles away. The losers live in Nairobi with our polluted rivers. The losers live in a Kenya where by 2035, we will have a 40% shortage of water as per population. That day zero you're talking about in Cape Town is here with us. Now, the problem with our country is we cannot see problems beyond our ethnicity. This is why we keep thinking that if I am a Kalenjin MP, I must go there and speak the Kalenjin narrative, and I must go there and speak the Maasai narrative. Now let us ask a question. If we are going to do the right thing, who is right according to the tribes? You see, the moment you start thinking in terms of your tribe, you will never be right. Because remember, when you were young and your mother hated your neighbor, to this day, 30 years later, that neighbor is bad. Not because you ever saw them do a bad thing, but because your mother said so. Such is the power of your tribe. So the moment we surrender our thinking and see those evictees in the Mau as either Kalenjin or Maasai, we miss the point entirely. We must address this issue as Kenyans, not Kipchumba Murkomen, I hope you're listening, not as a Kalenjin issue. You are the leader of the majority. Can you please represent that majority? Represent the needs of 45 million Kenyans and not just the people who vote for you, tafadhali.
All right, let's wind up on this and I'll give you the last word on this, Ochieng Ogod, on the environment. What's the, or rather on Mau, what's the story behind the story? What is it that we may have missed out, the bigger chunk of the story? Because here we are, you know, on the newsroom, you'll find that we have the politicians bickering and saying this about my tribe and that about the other community, or people are being fought. But what's the bigger story behind Mau?
I think what I've not seen that has come out quite clearly is the interaction between climate and vegetation. And how Mau plays an important role in that one. One of the countries with the best management forests in Africa is South Africa. That ensures good quality water flow. We have not really located the issue of Mau on that angle that is really needed for people to see the benefit that you are going to get out of this Mau forest. Rather, we are busy running after politicians. We are not even talking to experts, people who probably could have done some remote sensing or could have done some built data out of satellites to really enlighten people on the beauty that forest has for this country and beyond.
And beyond.
Yeah.
All right, and let's move on now to the other story that we ran, and that's to do with the 9 rhinos. And again, that is a matter of environment. Honorable Yusuf, Your thoughts on how so far that story has been told and whether there are major things that maybe we're leaving out. We had the director there, Julius Kipngetich, basically saying that there is an issue of indiscipline. There could have been an issue of incompetence. And the thing with Kenya, unfortunately, is that this story was big when the rhinos died, but it might just die just like the rhinos.
Well, first of all, I think this tragedy, this distressing development of 9 rhinos dying has exposed the institutional decay and the terrible state of affairs in the Kenya Wildlife Service, KWS, which is the institution that should be looking after our wildlife and improving both the quality and... but if you look at the stories that have been covered, when you look at the state of the Kenyan Wildlife Service, you would understand, in fact, that we're facing very serious problem in terms of our conservation of our wildlife. For example, it says in the last few years there has been a 21% decline in the number of certain animals, including zebras, 21% decline in zebras, 25% decline in giraffe, 27% decline in elands, another 25% decline of buffaloes. So the situation in our wildlife management and control is in a dire situation. And I think to a certain extent, some of the papers have done a very good job of exposing that. But I seem to be still in the dark as to what actually might have happened and how it could have been prevented, how it can be prevented in the future. And I think this is something that perhaps we need whoever is reporting for the newspapers.
Give us clarity.
Yes.
Mark, do you think by now heads should have been rolling, given 9 rhinos dead, and here we are again, business as usual?
One has to wonder how someone can sit an exam that has 11 possible points and you only get 2 right, and you still are considered competent. If you're transporting 11 animals and 9 die, and they were the sheep of a farmer, that farmer would have your head. But in this country, the veterinarian who did those injections, the driver, the rangers that were on duty, the supervising officer are all sitting pretty. The retirement package is intact, and they're fine. The reason being that we have become such a morally inept country that disappointment is our expectation. Mediocrity is our standard. The Kenya Bureau of Standards itself, as a mark, has no value to the average Kenyan. You don't even check for it when you're buying a product because our standards are that low. Now, the tragedy is this. We clap for ourselves when we get 8 million visitors. Tourists. France, on the other hand, entertains 80 million tourists who are going to look at a bunch of metals put together like a triangle. Africa, on the other hand, has a rich flora and fauna that is unique to Kenya, that is unique to our region. Whereas we should be protecting the rhinos just as much as we would protect a consignment of gold, because we know in a few short years, Kenya could be one of the few places on earth you can actually see a rhino. A few places on earth you can see the great herds of wildebeest crossing over the Mara. We have a resource. 8 million visitors out of a possible 7 billion human beings. We're not even touching 10%, not even 1%. The potential is huge. What we are doing here again is showing that we as a nation have no value for what God has bestowed upon us as a natural resource. And that disdain is reflected in how we treat our animals. Because you explained to me, 25%, a quarter of our zebras have died. No one is hunting zebras. The Chinese have no use for zebra skin as they do for rhino horn. So what is happening? Our own foolishness is eating into a resource that, by the way, already is a big a foreign exchange earner for the country. It should be our priority. In fact, not just from a conservation perspective, from a selfish businessman perspective, to ensure that those animals are there.
All right, Ochieng, we need to wind up. Your thoughts on what needs to be done in regards to matters environment when it comes to reportage? Evidently, there is a huge gap between what we are doing and what needs to be put out there.
I think, first of all, the media houses need to invest pretty well on training journalists who can report on environmental issues. And after training them, give them the capacity, but I think there's also the need to give them the capacity in terms of the equipment that they need to use to report on these things. I mean, I worked for the Standard newspaper many years back. It was very easy to get a chopper to go to Northeastern to follow a politician than to get a vehicle to travel to Mau and go and report there. That is shameful, if you do ask me.
All right. So, Mheshimiwa, your closing comments?
Well, I think there's an absolute need to investigate and get a comprehensive report on what has happened relating to rhinos. Rhinos are endangered species. We are one of the few countries that are privileged to have them. And I think also from what has been reported about the Kenya Wildlife Services, the cabinet secretary and the ministry responsible for that needs to do a thorough shake-up and a clean-up to make sure that we have in the right institutions that can protect our heritage, because wildlife is one of the few things that Kenya is going to be the leading provider in the world. And if we do not have a good management system, a good protective system, then we can say goodbye to it.
Absolutely. All right, Mark, your closing remarks.
A country whose citizens have no respect for themselves will never go anywhere. A country where if you're charged to take care of rhinos, you will watch 9 of them die under your watch, is not a country that is headed anywhere. We need to stop being a country that is expecting corruption to stop at the top, when at the bottom we are party and parcel of this particular corruption. Personal responsibility when you're given a job as a journalist, when you're given a job as a civil servant, has to begin to show an impact. You've got to be able to say that I, Mike Gitonga, when I sat here at the beginning of January 2018, and now I have done X percent to change my country, X percent to make it better for future journalists. I've done X percent to make sure that come 2022, my country is better. That is the question every Kenyan must ask. We must, in fact, when we meet in bars and churches and other places, we must stop asking how much money you have and start asking, what have you done for your country?
Thank you very much. Mark Bichachi, communications consultant. We have Ochieng Ogodo, environmental journalist, and Honorable Yusuf Hassan, who's member of parliament for Kamkunji. It is now 28 minutes to 8. That's where we wind up newsroom this morning. But do stay with us right here on Morning Express. We continue after the break.